community and not only the realtor community, but the community as a whole. I have known Terry a long time. In fact, I saw a life-changing event in his career. Little known fact, Terry once ran for political office. He ran for assessor of El Paso County. My recollection is that he lost by 1 vote. Only discovered that if his wife would have voted for him, he would have been assessor. But his wife knew best, and trust me, Terry, that was the best thing that ever happened to you, right? Yeah, you know that too. Okay, good. Hey folks, a little less than a month from today, I will be giving my second State of the City address at the Broadmoor. Some of you could be there. So today I'm going to give you a little preview, kind of a sneak preview of some of the information that we'll talk about in the second State of the City address. When I became the mayor, if you paid attention to anything I said in the campaign, which probably is about 2 or 3% of you, I talked about 3 things that I thought we needed to do in Colorado Springs, and they were basically a reflection of my assessment of what had transpired over the last decade or so in Colorado Springs. Number 1, that we needed to change the political climate. The level of tension between the mayor and the city council and between the city and other governmental entities in the Pikes Peak region was such that it was hurting economic development and having an adverse impact on community development. So, number 1, change the political climate. Number 2, we needed to invest in critical public infrastructure. Going into and out of the recession, Colorado Springs had basically cut in half the level of public works funding over the last decade or so, from about 2005 to 2015, and it was showing. 60% of our roads are in poor condition. They've passed that 10-year average life cycle of a road, and while the deterioration for the first 10 years is pretty slow, once you reach that, they deteriorate very quickly. That's where potholes come from, and that was a serious problem. And secondly, was stormwater. It's not a problem that the public understands very well, but it's a very, very important issue in our part of the country. And our lack of attention to stormwater, since the voters did away with the stormwater enterprise in 2005, had created some very serious problems. Number 1, Pueblo was threatening to bring a suit. They give it notice. In fact, they filed a notice of intent to sue the day after I became mayor, saying we're going to try and block the Southern delivery system from going online in April of 2016. This is our massive $825 million investment in a water distribution system that will take care of our growth for the next 50 years. And because they had given us a permit in 2008, and then we had turned around in 2009 and done away with our stormwater enterprise, they felt we were in violation of that permit. And I frankly think they had a pretty good argument. And then, of course, the EPA was very concerned that we'd gone as an enterprise. When we had the enterprise, we were spending about $17 million a year in stormwater infrastructure. When the voters did away with that, actually the council technically did away with it at the direction of the voters, we were only spending about $3 million a year in the EPA, and we're in negotiations now. They have threatened suit to revoke what's called our MS4 water quality permit that allows us to put stormwater into the interstate river system, because the Fountain Creek flows into Arkansas, which flows into the Mississippi, which flows into the Gulf of Mexico. So we had some serious infrastructure problems. So number 2, invest in critical public infrastructure. Number 3, for literally 15 years, Colorado Springs had very flat economic growth. Wage growth was very flat. We'd had virtually no job growth. We had replaced the jobs over 15 years that we lost, the high-tech manufacturing jobs, the Intels, the Hewlett-Packards, the Digital Equipments, the Texas Instruments. We had replaced them, but we had replaced them with lower-paying jobs. And so we've had very flat job growth and virtually no wage growth. So to the extent that government can help facilitate, they can't do a whole lot about job creation, but they can create an environment more conducive to it. So number 3 was to promote, to the extent possible, new job creation. So let me give you a kind of a report on the state of those 3 priorities. Number 1, we have made an awful lot of progress in terms of the political climate. You don't every day pick up the newspaper and the headline article is some big dispute between the mayor and the city council. It's only about once a month now. And the fact of the matter is we still got a couple of characters on the city council, but when they send me nasty emails, I don't send them to the newspaper, okay? And the relationship is pretty good. It's pretty productive on all the important issues. We've had no less than 6-3 majorities, and typically 8-1 or 7-2 majorities on all the critical issues. And I think we're working very well with the commissioners and the other communities in the Pikes Peak region. And let me tell you, that makes a difference. I was in Phoenix a couple weeks ago in the offices of a company that when a company wants to move from its current location, you hire these people. You folks in real estate understand this well. And they kind of screen areas for you. Possible locations, you give them your priorities, affordability, all these sorts of different things, and then they go out and do the screening process for you and narrow it down to a couple locations. I was absolutely amazed the extent to which they take into account the political environment. And it's something that you really have to, I spend a lot of time talking to the city council folks. Be careful what words you use publicly, because they get around the country very, very, very quickly. Remember the damage that we suffered several years ago when, I think kind of as a punitive measure, the then city manager shut off the street lights and stopped watering the parks and thought, oh, this will wake them up, Well, it just was devastating to us from a national perspective. It was in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, stuff like that. So you have to be very careful about the political environment. I think we have really made some dramatic improvements in that. Number 2, infrastructure. Frankly, we have moved much farther than I ever thought we could in 1 year in terms of dealing with the infrastructure issues. First of all, right after I got elected, sat down with the council and I said, let's do some polling. Let's find out where people stand on these infrastructure issues and what they'd be willing to pay for and not pay for. And Colorado Springs Ford paid, which is a local advocacy group, paid for the polling. Not surprisingly, it showed that people cared a heck of a lot more about roads than they did stormwater. They don't quite understand the significance of the stormwater issue. And when we asked them, if we dealt with stormwater in the current, on the general fund budget, would you be willing to pay increased taxes for an effort to reverse the trajectory on roads? And they said, yes, we would. And then we asked them, would you be willing, if you want to pay a property tax or a sales tax? It'd be interesting to you as realtors to know, even when they understand how low their property taxes are relative to the rest of the country, and that property taxes are a very, very small part of the revenues of the city of Colorado Springs. Only 8% of the revenue is property taxes. We get the same as the Pikes Peak Library District. Even when they know all that, guess what? They'd rather pay increased sales tax than property tax by overwhelming majority. And I think that's a reflection of the fact that they know that sales tax is shared. 38% of it is paid for by people outside of Colorado Springs, 20% by tourists, and about 18% by county residents that don't live in the city. So with that information, we went to the voters and issued 2C, a 0.62 sales tax increase for 5 years to generate approximately about $250 million over the 5 years, about $50 million a year, to apply just to roads. And it passed overwhelmingly, 65-35%. Anytime anything in El Paso County that involves taxes past 65-35, you know you've got the right issue. People are really mad about the roads. And you see the evidence. This 2C, the paving season in Colorado is essentially May 15th to October 15th. I think probably by the end of this month, we have paved 220 lane miles. That's about 40,000 tons of, 400,000 tons of asphalt. You know, it will take a lot of effort over the next 5 years to start reducing the trajectory. To give you a realistic sense of where we'll be, I told you 60% of our roads were in poor condition going into this. 5 years from now, we'll probably be at 40% of our roads in poor condition. But that's a pretty amazing difference. Lest you think that we're the only ones that have road problems, Denver and Aurora have worse roads than we do. We have the 26th worst roads in the country. Denver and Aurora are the 22nd worst roads in the country. Okay. But it's an issue we had to address. I'm very grateful to the voters for stepping up, because that also is very important to economic development. I can't tell you, when we talk to companies, I'm in negotiations with a company that's thinking about moving to the airport, a really good manufacturing company, and they said, you know, what's going on with local investment in public infrastructure. Companies pay attention to that sort of thing. The other big issue, as I said, was stormwater. Driven by these legal issues that we had with the EPA and with Pueblo, of course, we had a sense of urgency. We needed the SDS, Southern Delivery System, was supposed to go online April 28th, and we were going right down to the wire, but about a week and a half before that, we entered into an intergovernmental agreement with Pueblo, whereby Colorado Springs and Colorado Springs Utilities have agreed to spend $460 million over the next 20 years on its stormwater program and stormwater infrastructure. That's to include the construction of 71 infrastructure projects, stormwater infrastructure projects. The EPA were putting in more inspector positions and things like that. That resolved our issues with Pueblo, and we were able to turn on the Southern Delivery System on April 28th. It was really fun to be there, just with a one click of the mouse. You could see on a computer screen the amount of water coming out of the reservoir, coming through the 3 pump stations and into the Colorado Springs distribution system. Right now, we're only using about 5 million gallons a day from the Southern Delivery System, but over the years, we'll be up to 50 million a day. This will supply enough water for the next 50 years of growth in Colorado Springs. We're still trying to resolve issues with the EPA, but most of them have been resolved by the efforts we put forward into that intergovernmental agreement. So a lot of progress on infrastructure. And then I also would not have predicted May of 2015, when I got elected, the amount of progress we'd make in terms of the economic development situation. Let me just give you one number that is pretty impressive. In the last 12 months, we've created 9,200 jobs in Colorado Springs. We hadn't created more than 4,000 in a year for the previous decade. At the current time, we're in the enviable position of having 15,000 job openings in Colorado Springs and only 11,500 people looking for work. The problem, of course, and by the way, those 15,000 job openings, just to make sure you understand, they're not just service jobs at McDonald's. The average salary is $64,000 a year for those 15,000 jobs. So they're good jobs. But here's the categories. Number 1, software engineer. Number 2, registered nurse. Then a lot of jobs in cybersecurity that are very hard to fill. And one of the things that we obviously have to spend a lot of attention to over the next several years is workforce development. We've got a company moving into the airport, Sierra Nevada, Sierra Completions. They're building big hangars out there right now. Believe it or not, they've got FAA certified welding jobs that pay $75,000, $80,000 a year. But the guy with a sociology degree that works at Starbucks, because he can't find another job, won't get that job unless they're willing to go to Pikes Peak Community College for 6 to 9 months to get the welding certification. As you know, some of the high schools are starting to come to the recognition that they need to get back into the vocational education area, because right now we've got lots of demand for construction jobs, high-paying construction jobs. So we really do need to have a lot of emphasis on workforce development, but it's an enviable position to be in, to have that level of job opening and attracting smart people to these well-paid jobs. Let's kind of break down some of the economic activity that's taking place. I don't think I have to tell you folks that the Colorado Springs real estate market's one of the best in the country right now. And I think it's healthy. I hope you agree with me on this. I would rather be appreciating in the residential market 6-7% a year than have an 18% rise and stuff like that, where I think we would be setting ourselves up for a pretty dramatic bust. I think the growth that we've had over the last several years has been pretty consistent and very healthy, and I don't think we're going to see a bust. So I think I'm pleased about that. The level of commercial activity, for those any commercial brokers here, there's a lot of increased commercial activity. Folks that weren't otherwise looking in Colorado Springs, I encourage you, just read the business section and see who's buying apartment complexes. There's a lot of new commercial interest in Colorado Springs. Downtown. To be a vibrant city, you need a vibrant downtown. Typically, a vibrant downtown means more people working and living there. And that's exactly what's starting to happen in downtown Colorado Springs, where we've opened up a Catalyst campus at the old Santa Fe Railroad Station. We think there'll be 1,000 more young professionals in there within the next year, doing very high-tech startup kinds of things. A lot of collaboration between small companies, sharing of resources, things like that. Millennials, as you know, like to live close to where they work. So we're seeing a lot more residential development in downtown Colorado Springs. We've got 2 large high-rise apartments coming out of the ground on opposite ends of Wasatch in the next, coming out right now. I think that the U.S. Olympic Museum, hopefully we can begin construction on that by the end of the year. Can be a tremendous catalyst for development of the southwest downtown area. So a lot of positive signs in terms of downtown. One of the great success stories in Colorado Springs over the last several years has been the airport. An airport is an enterprise. There's no taxpayer dollars that go into it. It has to support itself. And to the extent that it's not making a lot of money on the general aviation or corporate aviation side, it makes that up by charging the commercial airlines a fee per seat. And one of the problems was Colorado Springs had a per seat fee of about $13, which wasn't that much lower than big airports like DIA. It was like $15.50, $16. We have been able to, as a result of the success on our general aviation side, we've run a lot of companies from, we gave them basically tax incentives in a commercial aeronautical zone. So if you're in aeronautics related business, you move into this zone, you get some tax benefits not only from Colorado Springs and El Paso County, but primarily from the state of Colorado. And a lot of companies have moved in out there, Sierra Completions being the largest. There'll be 2,000 employees before it's all over. I think we're going to have some really exciting announcements in the next month or so on some other manufacturing facilities. I'm going out from here out there for the grand opening of an expanded Cutter Aviation facility with lots of new employees. And the revenues that has brought into the airport has allowed us to reduce in 2 years the fee that we charge commercial airlines from $13 a seat to $6.28 a seat. That's what's brought Frontier back to town with 3 dailies now, Vegas, Phoenix, and soon to be Orlando. And by the way, if you want to take the kids or grandkids to Disney World, you better book it quickly. I think they're booked for the first 3 months already, beginning in October. And so we also think we're going to get some additional other airlines. We think United may do some expansion in Alaska, a few other airlines. So we feel very good about the airport situation. The UCCS is a tremendous economic development story. Those of you who've lived a long time, I took a summer class out there in 1971, and if you would have told me, I mean, the teacher was bad, the facility was bad, I mean, it was really bad. If you would have told me that fast forward to today, there'd be 12,000 students out there, some of the things going on, just take a look at the size of that Performing Arts Center they're building on North Nevada. It's quite impressive. I don't know if you know it, but UCCS and Penrose have entered into an agreement to build one of the phases of the City for Champions, which is the sports medicine building that will be opened by 2018. A lot of good things there. And we've got one of the things I'd like to tell people is when I was born in Colorado Springs, there was a little over 40,000 people. Now there's a little over 40,000 college students. It's really pretty amazing. Colorado College is doing well, and of course Pikespeak Community College as well. What are some of the sectors of the economy that we think have the greatest growth potential? First and foremost, cybersecurity in particular. We have in Colorado Springs a very unique trilogy of synergy. That's pretty good, trilogy of synergy. We have got these very critical military missions that are very heavily cyber dependent. U.S. Space Command runs the entire U.S. Presence in space. You've got NORAD, NORTHCOM, and several, the Air Force Academy is opening a cyber center out there. They're very, very heavily into cyber. And then you've got academic, 4 out of the 5 National Security Agency certified academic programs in Colorado or in El Paso County. The only one that's not in El Paso County is University of Denver. So we are offering graduate and undergraduate level cyber degrees and also developing certification programs, because a lot of, particularly the smaller companies, don't need people with degrees. They just need to take that kid that's been very successful going home from high school and hacking after class every day. They just need to give them a couple of certifications, and this guy can make $100,000 in a couple of years. You laugh, but it's really true. That's who they're looking for. We now have the 5th number of cybersecurity jobs in the country in Colorado Springs, and we think it could be an area of considerable growth. We think that's going to be enhanced by the fact that the state of Colorado has agreed to locate a national cybersecurity center here. And that's going to be on North Nevada in the current TRW building, which is now the Expo Center. And UCCS owns it, and we've got an $8 million appropriation from the legislature to redo the shell. And then we're attracting tenants, in addition to the National Cybersecurity Center, obviously a unique set of tenants that will allow us to build that building out. It will have 3 components. Number 1 is a cyber training institute. And we're having our first conference at the Broadmoor November 13th, and they will train public officials, governors. We're having it in conjunction with the National Governors Association. And it will be both private sector executives, executive government officials for training programs. Number 2, we'll have a rapid response capability. Large companies, for the most part, have people that do their cybersecurity work for them. But there's a lot of underserved cyber folks out there who can't afford to have a company that they pay on a regular basis, and they need assistance dealing with a cyber intrusion And we will be able to help them, and if we can't do it in-house, we can refer them to specialty intrusion folks. I forgot to tell you the third prong of that synergy is our private sector here. Unbeknownst to some of you, I suspect, there are 90 cybersecurity companies based in Colorado Springs. And some of them are just doing fabulous work. Any of you have ever heard of a company called Route 9B? It's in the Wells Fargo building. It's just rated the #1 in the Cybersecurity 500 for up-and-coming businesses. They've got 40 people in Colorado Springs now. They're expanding to 60 in the next couple of months. They've got 20 in San Antonio. You go into this place, you think you're on a Star Wars set. The lights are flashing and everything. And you go into their war room, and they've got a desk for each of their Fortune 500 customers and their large utility customers. And those desks are manned 24/7, and essentially what they're doing is they're infiltrating their customer or their client's computer system solely for the purpose of detecting foreign intruders, North Koreans, Russians, Chinese. It's an amazing thing. And that's the kind of activity that's going on right here in Colorado Springs. The other component of the National Cybersecurity Center will be research, public policy and law. This is an area that's growing and developing and needs, legal and public policy framework, and workforce development. And that's going to be largely through the University of Colorado Springs to help us build our cybersecurity workforce to meet the demands of the jobs that are becoming available. We're attracting a lot of private funding, Elpomar, Handshoots, Daniels, and others. We'll hope to have an executive director hired by mid-September, and we're off and running, and you should pay attention to that. I think cyber is going to be a big part of our future. Aerospace continues to be strong. A lot of large contracts coming to the large companies that have a presence here, and it's amazing, folks, if you pay attention to it. I was at a celebration out at Northrop Grumman. They had just were celebrating the fact they've had like a 15-year contract with the federal government, and over that 15 years they have disseminated $1 billion in local contracts to small companies that serve all Colorado Springs-based companies that serve that work. And at this meeting, there was a ton of small companies here that I'd never heard of, 20, 30 employees that do a lot of the subcontracting on these big contracts. So I think is that the hook? When you stand up and answer questions. So anyway, things look really good. We're working very hard. I think we're going to continue to have some good announcements. I was just telling Terry Storm, I just saw the sales tax receipts for June collected in August. They were up 10% over last year. Last year was not a bad year. Anytime you have double-digit growth, that's really remarkable. Having said that, it's going to be another tough budget year because of our increased stormwater obligations, and we just got a budget buster notification that we have to bail out a couple of closed fire and pension funds. Pension liabilities for governments are just out of whack, and you'll hear in my State of the City speech a lot about the legislature has to deal with pension reform. They've been pretty oblivious to it, but they have to deal with it. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and see if you've got any questions that I can answer. Yes, ma'am.
When is your State of the City?
It's September 8th at the Broadmoor. Tickets are available through the Regional Business Alliance. It's a kind of a fun event. We'll give, we always give a kind of a Lifetime Achievement Award for Spirit of the Springs, and last year, very timely, we gave it to former Mayor Harry Hope, and he died about 6 months later, and we've got a very worthy recipient this year. Yes.
What's your position on the Amendment 69 and why?
Is 69 universal health care?
Yes, that one.
Oh,
What do you think about that?
I'm vehemently opposed.
Yeah.
All I ask you to do is look at the finances. There's a public policy research institute that has a totally neutral view on it, and they just issued a report saying that after the first year it's absolutely financially unsustainable. They think that the cost to the Colorado taxpayers could be $7 billion over the first 5 years. I mean, that would just be incredibly burdensome. So I'm vehemently opposed. Any other questions?
So you mentioned the $486 million that the utilities will invest over the next 20 years.
No, 420. The city's about 379. The utilities, the rest 460. I'm sorry, 460. Yeah.
So we recently saw an uptick in rates. Is there a corollary for that to happen in the future, or do you feel like
actually your uptick in rates is more attributable to the Southern delivery system than it is to stormwater. I hate to tell you this, but I don't like to ever call millions of dollars a drop in the bucket, but for utilities, the $79 million that they're paying of that 420 or 460 is a drop in the bucket. $825 million for the Southern delivery system is not a drop in the bucket. Yes?
On UCCS, there's about 10,000 students now. What's that?
Close to 12,000.
What's that projected to be in the next 5 years?
Depends upon, one of the amazing things about UCCS, and the Chancellor gets so much credit for this, all this growth has taken place with virtually no state support whatsoever. All these buildings that are being built out there are being built with these, private-public partnerships, and in-credit unions got $10 million in that. It's just remarkable. They build the dormitories, basically, and the kids pay for it over time, they bond it and things like that. If the state ever got a funding stream for higher education, the growth, a lot of people think within 30 years it would be bigger than Boulder. I think the potential, it is the fastest growing campus. That's really the hook when they cut the. Yes, ma'am.
Relying on sales tax for our money is fine when the government's going well and when the economy's going up. What do you plan to do if it goes back down? And we all know it will.
Yeah, it will.
How do we maintain over time?
Well, a couple of things we've done. Portion of your sales tax is what's called PSST. 0.4% is police and fire. Okay, that combines with other general fund dollars. Police and fire in Colorado Springs is 55% of the budget. That's a lot. Okay, but that shows you how lean and mean we are every place else. We've developed a $14 million reserve fund in PSST for the sole purpose of keeping police and fire fully manned in a future downturn. But I can't tell you we won't be right back where we were in public works and stuff like that. Here's the problem. We cannot raise property tax without a vote of the people. I'll show you the polling. They will not vote for a property tax increase for the city. They'll do it on occasion for their school district. They have no clue how little property tax revenue the city has. In a $260 million general fund budget, property tax is $20 million. We are way too, but this is not just, as long as you have the Gallagher Amendment playing in combination with Tabor, cities in Colorado will be overly dependent on sales tax. Let me explain that. Gallagher represses the portion of property tax that can come from residential, can never exceed 45% of the total bill. And and there's always more residential coming online. That screws, quite frankly, the commercial property taxpayer. But it's a boom to us residential property taxpayers. But the only way, and if you remember, for a while, all the cities were reducing their mill levy. And what happens when you can't re-raise the mill levy without a vote of people. They won't do that. So as the Colorado Constitution stands right now, in the foreseeable future, sales tax, a property tax will never be a viable source of revenue for cities like Colorado Springs. Boulder, Denver, where you've got more liberal population, they tend to win elections. But on property tax elections, I can show you the poll. We would not do it. We won't win it.
I think that probably we should wrap that up.
Okay.
And before you sit down, may I have a picture with you?
Oh, sure.
This is my only opportunity.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.